everybody, it's Chris Eads, known online as Wootini, here with another Gay Gamer video podcast. In fact, I would like to welcome you all to the 500th episode. I can't believe it. This started like 10 years ago when the Gay Gamer podcast had stopped and people wanted it back, and I was like, well, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't have a professional audio microphone, but I do have a video camera, so let me do a video podcast where I just sit on the couch and talk into a camera, because that's also easier than coordinating with one or more people to have a conversation in a podcast, because then you've got to deal with other people's schedules, and this is just me. I find the time, I sit on my couch, I chat. This has been going on for 500 episodes, which is insane, like 10 years of this nonsense. And people are still watching. Obviously not as many as there were when Gay Gamer was still around and I would have hundreds of views on some of my episodes. Now it's like 30. If I get 40, I'm like, ooh. But it's great. I just do it to keep a little piece of gaygamer.net alive on the internet somewhere. Thank you all for watching. I wanted to do something a little different for my 500th episode, hence the classier outfit. I wanted to talk about the most influential gaming moments in my life. So we have to go all the way back in time to start, back to like the 70s. Alright, maybe the late 70s or early 80s. I don't know the exact year, but one day my father came home from I don't know where he'd gone, but he'd come back. He'd stopped at a garage sale, and he'd picked up a Pong machine that you hook up to the television, and you can play Pong on your TV. And I don't remember the brand. It looked sort of something like this, I think. That's close. And basically, that was the beginning of, video games, because there were there were arcade games, but I sucked at them, and it was like a waste of quarters when I could be using those quarters to buy comic books that I would get to keep and read again, as opposed to spending 30 seconds getting killed by aliens, and then there goes my quarter. So this at home was a lot more fun, because you could play it whenever you wanted, and it was just there. I do remember my father said, you can't hook it up to the living room TV, you can only hook it up to this little black and white one, like in the kitchen, whatever, because... And I don't think he let it stay hooked up to the TV. I think we had to like pull it out and hook it up if we wanted to play, because it wasn't like a thing. But I feel like that's what started me on, you can play video games at home, that's kind of cool, even though it was just Pong. Then, as time went on, my father decided that we were going to get a home computer. Now, you have to understand, this is the 80s, so we got a VIC-20, the Commodore VIC-20, which was not much to speak of. It was, but we used it enough that my father decided that we needed to upgrade, so then we upgraded to the Commodore 64. And then we got a disk drive, because the VIC-20 had the tape recorder. Don't ask. If you weren't alive then, you wouldn't understand. But the Commodore 64, we were supposed to be using it for homework, and we did. But that's also where I would play video games. I was obsessed with Gorf for some reason, which is weird, because that's not really my kind of thing now, but at the time I was super into it. But I also got to play things like the Infocom games, like Zork and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I loved. Like all those text adventures, those were really cool. And I also got into a little bit of game pirating with one of my friends, who also had a Commodore 64, and we would like swap floppies back and forth and play things like Crush, Crumble, and Chomp and whatever, and make copies of games for each other. So we'd each buy one, and then we'd copy it to give to the other, and then we'd each have two for the price of one. And that also got me on the internet for a little bit of rudimentary online gaming back in the mid-80s there. We would dial up to the bulletin board at the high school in our town, and you would dial up to the bulletin board and you could post messages, you could live chat with people. And there was some kind of like a Star Trek game that was like text-based, but it had like little asterisks and, you know, ASCII kind of thing for rudimentary graphics to show where your starship was, and you just keep mashing fire, fire, fire until you blew up the other ship. It was not a lot of strategy to it, but it was kind of fun, and the idea of playing a game online against somebody who you didn't know was kind of neat at the time. It was mind-boggling in the 80s. My brother did get an NES, but I didn't play it a lot because A, it was his, and I didn't want him to get mad at me for like, hey, I didn't say you could use my toy. But also, I feel like I didn't really care about the games that he played on it. They weren't the games that I might want to play. Like, he didn't have Zelda, so I'm like, whatever. But not that I knew what Zelda was. Like, I just knew that I tried some of the games on his NES and was like, you know. They weren't, to me, any more exciting than the Atari games that I had played. But in college, I decided that I really wanted to get my own video game system and play video games at home. So I went to the mall, and I went to GameStop, or maybe it was Electronics Boutique at the time, I don't know. Remember that? And I asked the salesperson, should I get a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis? And he actually had very good advice. Because, you know, they're basically the same price and everything. It's not like he'd get a better commission if I bought one over the other. So he was like, take a look at the wall of game cartridges for each one and see which system has the games that you want to play. And I was like, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. So obviously there's a lot of cross-platform games, but I, for whatever reason, decided to get the Sega Genesis. In retrospect, I probably should have gotten a Super Nintendo because over time I learned that I really enjoy RPGs, and the Super Nintendo had some really good RPGs, whereas the Sega Genesis did not. However, I don't regret my Sega Genesis. It was fine. I played lots of games, and it was very fun. And, in fact, as I grew into adulthood and got my first job and all, I bought a used Sega CD and a bunch of games off of somebody at work because he didn't want it anymore. And I was like, sure. So then I got to play some Sega CD games, which were super fun, and I got to play Lunar, which was really cool. And there was another one, Vi, I think it was. That was a good one too. So those were kind of fun because they had, like, you know, they were good RPGs with the little anime cutscenes because they were on CD. They look like garbage now, but at the time it was like, whoo. However, I do regret buying the 32X to plug into my Genesis. I think I only ever got like a couple other games for it, like Virtua Fighter, and I think there was a Star Wars game, or there was a mech game. Maybe that's what I got. Anyway, I basically just used it to play Doom, which was really cool because I didn't have a PC. I had a PC briefly for a little while, but it got all virusy and gross, and I've been a Mac person ever since, and Macs don't really play games, so I never really got into the PC gaming world properly. But the 32X basically became an expensive way to play Doom at home on the TV, so I regretted that purchase. That was like my first introduction to regret. Gaming regret. Then the PlayStation made it worse. Not that I regret buying a PlayStation, but at the time, I was like, no, I don't want the Sega Saturn. I'm going to get this PlayStation thing because it seems really cool, and I bought into the hype, and I got all excited, and I reserved a PlayStation on launch day at, you know, GameStop, Software, etc., whatever, and near work, and I went over after work, and I picked up my PlayStation, and I went home, and I was so excited, and then I basically played Toshinden for, like, months, because there was nothing else to play. I would buy games thinking they might be good, and then they would not be, and there were some games like Kiliak the DNA Imperative. That was terrible. Then I remember I bought like Theme Park because I thought, well, I don't really know if I would like this. This is a new genre for me, but maybe I'll really like it. Let me give it a try. I did not like it. I found out I really don't like sim games. at all. So it was a while, but eventually, obviously, the PlayStation became amazing, and there were tons of games for it, and it was fantastic. So, obviously, I don't regret buying a PlayStation. But it taught me a valuable lesson that you don't need to buy a console at launch. So since then, my PlayStations and Xboxes have all been bought the following year once there's a really cool game that I actually really want to play, and then I will buy the system to play that game. Then, of course, there will be other games that I can get too. But the only systems that I've really ever bought at launch have been Nintendo systems, because Nintendo is the only company that seems to go, we need to give them something really awesome to play at launch, so they'll buy our system. And not regret it for a while. Because they'll usually throw you a Zelda game, which is super awesome. And so that's why I bought a Wii at launch. And I reserved mine, and I went to the big launch at in Times Square. There was Toys R Us. It's not there anymore. But I reserved my Wii on launch day, and I was there in line outside of Toys R Us in Times Square to pick it up at midnight. And that was amazing. Not just because the Wii is super fun, and Wii Sports was great, and the Zelda game was awesome, but because I wrote up that experience and shared photos, and that is what launched me on gaygamer.net. I had already been a member of the forums and everything, but then there was like a call for writers, and I was like, oh, that would be fun. And I said, let me see if I can get, him to agree to let me to write for the site. But then it turned out to be a lot more work than I thought, and I said, no, never mind, it's fine. Sorry to turn you down, but no. And he's like, oh, you could just write on the weekends. And I'm like, oh, that might be alright. But then it turned out, no, he assigned me like weekday articles, and I was just like, oh my god, this is a lot of work. Like, so I go to work, I come home, and then I sit down and I have to write for Gay Gamer. And it was a lot. But I enjoyed it, so I kept doing it. And I didn't get paid for it, but I would occasionally get, like, a free game to review. I also made a nice connection with Nintendo publicity, and so I'd get to go to, like, Nintendo press events, and, like when they had the Mario World set up in Times Square, I could just go up and skip the whole long line. I could just walk in. They're like, hey, Chris, how you doing? Come on in. Here's your Tanuki ears. Now just run around and jump on things and enjoy the obstacle course. But now it's, and then like, it was amazing. And then even better was when Flynn's like, hey, would you be interested in going to E3 this year? And I'm like, duh. So, I got to go to E3 3 times. And the second one was the best. Because the first one, there was a bunch of us, and I had a bunch of appointments, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was really scared. I didn't know where anything was. It was all overwhelming, and I was just like, oh my god, this is a lot. The second one, there was a good amount of us. I think there were even more of us covering it that year. So there was like 6 of us, and it was great. There was a lot of us to spread the wealth, so I wasn't as busy, and I knew where things were, I knew what I was doing, and I felt more comfortable. So the second one was like, that was the one. The third one, less so. There was only like 2 of us, and he was writing for another site also at the time, so it was mostly on me, and I had a lot of appointments, and it was just a lot of work. And then that was the end of E3, because Gay Gamer couldn't afford to send us anymore, because the site was starting to, dwindle and fall apart. I did also get to go to PAX East a bunch of times. That was super fun. That was easy because it was just in Boston, so I would just get a bus to Boston, and they'd pay for my hotel and the bus ticket, and that was where I got to experience VR for the first time, which was super mind-blowing. And then I also got to go to New York Comic Con a bunch of times, and I regretted that, because that's like literally here in New York. Like, I could just take the subway and go to Comic Con, and I'm just like, why have I not been doing this all these years? I can totally get a press pass for Comic Con, because there's gaming at Comic Con. It's not about comics anymore. But, of course, that, sadly, gaygamer.net did not last. The writers all moved on to greener pastures, and there was a long period of time where I was literally the only writer, and I was trying to put up articles, and I'd do like at least a couple of articles a week, just trying to get things going, which is why I would do this podcast, so it would be like, there's content for the site. I try to do at least an article a day. And I was very sad when it went away, because I did enjoy it. And I do miss it. I still miss it. And again, that's why I'm still doing these, is because just to keep a little part of gaygamer.net alive on the internet. Because it changed a lot. It also changed my life in a very major way. Some of you who read the site back in the day might recall my We Fit diaries, where I got a copy of We Fit and said, all right, let's see if this even works. And I decided to do my review as a series of weekly diaries to track my lack of progress. Instead of trying to do like one big review, I would just see how it worked over time as I unlocked more exercises and did more activities and see what happened with my weight. And weirdly, playing it every day, I started to notice I was losing a little bit of weight. And I thought, you know, I bet if I started watching my diet and maybe eating less garbage, drinking less soda, that sort of thing, maybe I could make that number go a little bit faster. And it did. And then my friend was like, we're going to get you running for real, not just jogging in your living room with a Wiimote in your hand or your pocket. And so she took me out to get me proper running shoes, and then I started running outdoors for real, and ended up running the New York City half marathon in just under 2 hours, which I thought was pretty impressive for me. And I ended up losing like 45 pounds because of We Fit. Granted, the last 20 were because of the actual running, but still, it was amazing to lose 25 pounds just from a video game. Obviously, I've put it back on. Unfortunately, I'm very close to where I was when I first started playing We Fit back in the day. This vest is extremely tight. It is from my wedding, and it is a little bit tight. And sadly, I've not been able to get Ring Fit Adventures to really get me in that same space. I think it's because I was doing those weekly diaries, so it kind of kept me honest, and I wanted to show, like once I saw that it was actually working, and I wasn't going to be able to go, oh well, We Fit doesn't work. Once it was working, and I was like, oh, We Fit does work, I kept doing my diaries for like a long time, and showing my progress, and then like, you know, showing how it did actually work, and I would try to it kept me honest, because I had to show, okay, I lost some more weight, or I kept it even, or whatever. And if I went up a little, I was like, no, I've got to get it back down again. People are judging me, you know, because that's what the gays do. They will judge you. And with Ring Fit Adventure, it's like there's nothing, you know. I tried to post to Twitter when I would work out. I'd like post the results of my daily workout on Twitter to try to keep it, you know, keep me honest, but it's not really working. So even though Ring Fit Adventures is actually a really fun game, and it does make you work and sweat, I couldn't really get into it the same way that I got into We Fit for some reason. And I think it was that diary thing. And you might recall another diary review that I did for Animal Crossing City Folk. That became a whole thing. Because obviously, if we're talking about influential gaming moments, playing Animal Crossing changed everything. I got a GameCube for Christmas. Day after Christmas, I went to GameStop, and I said I would like to purchase this Animal Crossing game that I've heard so much about. And from that point on, I basically played Animal Crossing every day. When they went and did the DS version, I was like, oh my god, I can have my Animal Crossing village in my hand. I can bring it with me so that I don't have to like time travel or carry my GameCube with me home for Christmas or whatever. Like, you know, it's right there in my pocket. That's amazing, mind-blowing. And then with City Folk, that was where they put it back on the Wii. And Nintendo sent me a copy. I obviously was a huge Animal Crossing fan, so they sent me, I went to a nice press event, came home with like a Rossetti plush and everything. It was great. And then they sent me the review copy, and I started reviewing it, and I decided that, just like with Wii Fit, the Animal Crossing, I can do it as a weekly diary and kind of review the game as it unfolds week by week by week. But doing it from the perspective of I'm living in this town with these animals, and this is how my life is, and I like how this works, but I don't like how that works, and that sort of thing, and doing like sort of a more creative review. That continued, and then when the DS came out, the 3DS version came out, and I started playing New Leaf, I moved to a new town, and that was part of my diary, just I moved to a new town. And that's the other thing that I've kept up since GayGamer.net went away. Over on Medium, I continue to post my Animal Crossing diaries every week. I was very excited to move to my new island town on the Switch, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to keep doing that and this for as long as I can. I mean, I'm assuming at some point I'll have like 3 people watching my video, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's not worth doing anymore. But that I want to keep the videos going, so you can come back next week for another episode where it'll be regular gaming chat instead of this special, like, 500th episode extravaganza, which, it's just me on my couch. It's not an extravaganza. I dressed up for you. I hope you appreciate that. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.